Hey Kyle, I just wanted to make a recording instead of typing out some of my thoughts. I figured it'd be easier and I could just kind of show a screen recording as well. Um, I've gotten to some of your um, some of your plays so far. I've just looked at the downtrend sell the rip, and I do like a lot of what you have so far. So I'm excited to go through all of this. But I did have some questions about the sell the rip, specifically like this Baba trade. Um, so I totally like this stock and what you're seeing here, basically downtrending stock, and then that sort of rips at the open or near the open, rips up, you know, sort of peaks and then comes back into value, and then you short it down. Totally get that. Um, but I wanted to talk about like how much value you're putting on the value range and the pivot levels, and then just the price levels as well, and the highs and lows. So for me, I don't use, so basically, okay, so here you see, let's just go over this, and I'll just try and explain it over time as I talk about it. So you have the Baba that sells off really hard. So clearly that was a good finding new value breakdown move at the open, and then clearly finds value right between here and here, as you can see from the VPA, as well as sort of the low of the day and then the high of the day, or the high of the close. So I'm assuming then that you're seeing that price rips up at the open the next day, can't keep going, gets back down, and then you play the value range from R3 to S3, which I totally get. That's a good play. But what I wanted to say is that I think it's tricky. These are tricky to me because I think you are looking at this R3 and you're putting a lot of value on these R3 pivots. And I think that that's tricky because I think these are just one variable, and I also think they're sort of similar to a moving average. They're just they're really flexible, way more flexible than a straight up level or price. Um, but they're just more of like a good general telling you what could happen, and that's kind of my idea on it. And so I'll tell you why. So like R3 here is near the top of this sort of value area that was created yesterday, so that makes sense. But it's 218.14 cents, so it's actually not even at the whole dollar number. So that's one thing where I'm like, okay, so it's obviously flexible. It's 14 cents above the whole dollar, and whole dollars are pretty important. And then on top of that is really, to me, the value high is this right here, not all the way up here. So to me, honestly, or even right here, really. So I just feel like this pivot point is way too high. Now, sure, price did rip right up to the pivot point. I see that. And so I think that's why you're saying, well, right here is where I would enter because it went right up to the pivot point. But I honestly think that that is going to get you, that's going to mess you up more times in the future. Because I think if you did this trade again and this all happened again and it moved similarly, it could easily go just up here and then down. And so maybe it wouldn't have made it to your pivot point, but to me, it would have made it plenty high enough to have hit this area, you get low, and then it goes all the way down to your S3. Or, okay, so price looks like price opens somewhere around here. Well, what if price opened up just a little bit lower? And then, so price opens lower, which changes this a little bit. Let's say the pivot point is still up there, but it starts lower, which means it doesn't have to rip up as high, right? So say it rips up all the way up here, which is closer to like this level, not to the pivot point, maybe just the whole dollar 218, not the 218.15, and then gets down and then does the same thing. So I think where it opens up impacts the rip up as well. But I don't think you necessarily have to look at where it opens up. What I'm saying is I think that the pivot point, if you're going to use it, like to the penny, it needs to line up really well with the other levels. Like this pivot point, I think should line up really well with this high of yesterday. Or I'll show another example here. So what's a better one here? Okay, so right here, so a few days later, um, okay, so let's just go through this. So BABA creates value here, it rips up, like you said, and then you get the nice value play of R3 down to S3, and even goes further down to S4, right? And then it almost creates another new value here, the second half of the day. And then the next day opens up near the bottom of it, then you get a nice rip up to R3, like you're seeing here, and then it goes back down. But then later in the day, you can see it really, it hits the low of day and really compresses for like most of the day, and then really then breaks down and almost finds new value. So it stayed in this value for most of the day, compresses, and then boom, breaks down, finds new value. Here's where I think the pivot works better. Like now your pivot is up here for the next morning, and look how close it is. So it almost lines up with this level. So this level is the best to me because for one, whole dollar, 215 was also a pivot back here, was also exactly the low of this day, which lined up perfectly with this mid-afternoon low of day compression. And then, yeah, so you see how this pivot should be a little bit higher. So the pivot to me is really, even the pivot is telling you pretty well, like, hey, you know, R3 or R4, somewhere in this area, you're going to see some resistance. I think this level is more of the exact resistance because you have more things telling you low of day, this compression breakdown, whole dollar. But these two pivots also tell you, hey, this is going to be resistance. But this is where I think, you know, using the pivot points too precisely will mess you up. Okay, so say you sort of understand what I'm saying, and say you're willing to not use the pivots as perfectly, but you can still use them. So I just think you might not be able to get in as exact as you want, but I just think it's going to help you out a bit more. I think there's times when you can get in more exact, and then there's times where a little bit wider stop or waiting for a little bit extra confirmation here. So like for me here, you know, if you would have used this level more exact rather than R3, I think you still could have shorted anywhere around here, but you would have needed, the stop would have needed to be above this level. Yeah, so okay, so I deleted some of what I put on there of some of the markings, so I wanted to go over this again. So again, so like we were saying, you like the pivots, you also are using the value, which you can see here, VPA is right here, but then also this is the high of that afternoon. So I guess to me, if we were all looking to rip and sell, or sell the rip, to me it's not a short. What's the most important variable in all of this? The pivot, the high of here, the VPA, what is the most important? Well, I would say the most important is these VPA bars, because this is a big change from almost nothing here to then boom, a lot of volume here. So I would say this isn't a short until it gets in here, until it gets right here. I would say this is just extra confirmation. So price goes all the way up. Yeah, you want to short it, but really price has gone all the way up here. It's above the value right now. So it could be seeking new value. Now it probably isn't, because you probably need high R vol, and that would be then seeking new value this way, right? You need extra volume. It's almost pivoting now on a daily pivot. It's turning around. So it's most likely not that. But then it's more like, well, where is the precise turnaround spot? And I think the pivots aren't always the precise turnaround spot, and I think the levels aren't always either. They're all sort of flexible. So I think once it rips up and once it gets back down, you've now confirmed that the pivot is resistance. This level, this high, is resistance. This VPA, it's now back in. So you have three different confirmations that for sure it's not seeking new value, it's staying in the value. And so by this point, you're probably 75% or more sure that it is going down, most likely to S3 or the low of yesterday, right? So I just think maybe waiting a bit longer, and you can either get in here with a stop. Well, really, by the time it gets here, you can use whatever stop you want. Um, anyways, that's all I wanted to say about that. I mean, you know, I might not be correct with what I'm talking about in terms of what you were thinking for these shorts, but I just thought I saw the arrows here, so I was thinking you were putting a lot of value on the pivots. But I do think that in this full example, these pivots line up pretty close to those other variables, like the VPA bars and then the highs and lows of value that were created on the day before. So I do think these are great setups and everything. It totally makes sense. I just think that the pivots, if you are entering through them, are going to mess you up a bit unless you wait a little bit longer and kind of let all those resistance variables confirm themselves, or let a good pattern show here, like a good climactic volume candle or something like that. So I'm going to keep going through some of your other setups here. I'm going to probably just stick with the ones that I like, that I can kind of talk about. Some of them I don't really get, or that are tricky to me. And I'll just go over one that it's a little tricky to me, and I'll explain, but then I'll continue with some of the other ones that I like. I did like this Baba a lot. Totally makes sense. And like I said, I think a lot of these do line up. Kind of the rip ups really do line up with pivots, which then line up with the kind of the levels and the VPA. But I do think that the only way to play those value plays is to do the tops and bottoms of them. I think you like to do VPOC, and I really have no idea how to do VPOC, because VPOC is really flexible as well. Unless VPOC aligns with a previous level. So the one that I thought was a little tricky was your sell the dip ones. So I'm assuming you're saying that it's kind of already, it's just kind of trending down, and maybe it just kind of goes down right at the open. I just think that's really hard to do. I guess right here you're saying this 44.50 is the level. So you're saying price opens up right there, and then you sell it almost right away. Maybe it wicks up for a second. I think you show here the right here. Here's 44.50. I think you're saying gets below it here, and so you just short it from here, maybe after the first candle or right away with a stop above. Which I get that. I just think so. Then looking at the higher time frame setup for that, I'm trying to see that here. So I'm just going to go through the last few days. So Neo goes between its pivots here, but then does create a bit of value here and here, right? And then it even kind of condenses, so that's good. So that really confirms to you that this is the top and this is the bottom for this value. And then the next day you get your pivots, you know, this is the top R3, which lines up with this. So right now, this is like an amazing rip and sell to me, because that just lines up really well with R3. So that's what I was saying, when you get the pivots and they do line up with your levels, that's when you could put more weight on this pivots, because it's like a level then too. I think that's an amazing short potential from here then to down to S3, or even down here first. But so then it does that. So then this is value, stays within value here, but then kind of breaks out, sets another value range. This is sort of the low, and then looks like it can't get up any higher than here, right? So this is kind of its new value, this area. And then, so see, this is where it gets a little tricky, because then overnight it does a lot of stuff, and a lot of these levels don't line up with these to me. Like I guess this goes all the way down here, which does line up with this area, and then it goes all the way up here, which doesn't really line up with this previous value. And then it also does this. Is this the 8 a.m.? No, this is an 8 a.m. But then it does come up here. So I guess here works. Those kind of line up. So I guess what I'm saying is there's just a lot of different things happening here. I think this made sense. And then here, it opening up right here, I guess to me it tells me that it's like in the middle, right in the middle, maybe VPOC of this 2 days ago value. So that I wouldn't risk against that. I'd only risk against up here or down here. And so then, but I guess then maybe you're saying that, okay, this was value, and then now this is the new value, and then this is the high, which lines up with your 44.50. So you're going short right here. So that makes sense to me. It gets a little convoluted there. But I think that this play is much better here because this was a clear range. Price opens up here, aligns with pivots. Here there is no pivot, right? Okay, so I think this is a different play than right here. I think this is tricky. The whole sell the dip, meaning just selling right away. That's your ORB kind of, and I just think that's tricky, right? I think that you like pivots. Here you're in the middle, so I think that's hard. I think you should stick to more of the price. Like if this went up and then hit your pivot, which was the past high, right? So you almost use this pivot twice. Because look, this pivot is the same pivot line for both days, which is a really good sign. So you got this value range, you got a pivot there, plus it was the high of yesterday, plus it's now a pivot again. So if price would have gone up here, I think this is your play to go down, play the range from up here down to probably all the way down to here. So I think this play was really good, and then this is only good if it comes up to the edge here. Otherwise here I think you're in the middle, and hence why it's so up and down in this area. And then to me, I think another good play is, holy cow, price just really goes all the way down, finds new value, breaks out of this range, comes all the way back up mid-afternoon, and then you play the short here because now you have a new value, new range, because it's gone so far down, comes up. If it comes back in here, it's now back in this previous value. So I think this would have been a short as well, but that might be a different play. So hopefully that makes sense. I just think the sell the dip is tricky. So maybe you can send me some more messages and elaborate on that. And maybe this isn't your A+ setup. Maybe this is more of your A+ or what you see better. But if this is what you see better, then go over that with me some more. All right, so I was looking at your buy the dip setups. I like some of these setups too. I'm not sure if these are harder for you or not because it is the uptrending ones, but I think that this was a good find here. I know you like to short more, but yeah, I just wanted to add why I like it as well. What I think you're seeing is you see the uptrend, and then it sort of like makes, so it's, I guess I would call this a daily range support play, but you can also call it whatever you want, which is, you know, like the buy the dip, or like at the open it goes down and hits that support. But in my mind, I'm just seeing 2 days before this was the high, and then this is the lowest part, is right there, and then yesterday this was the high, and then yesterday this was also the low. So 2 days almost identical, almost both inside days, and then price opens, you know, maybe in the middle or maybe a little bit lower in the range. And so now you have like this support play and this support play together. They really work as support, and then it kind of just depends on how early you want to get in or when you see it turning around. So price goes down, I guess you could go long here thinking it's going to bounce here, or you wait and then it goes down to here, which is here, and then you go long. And so the idea is, yeah, just to go long in this general area to then get back up to the top of this range. So it's basically just continuing that daily range, and then up here you have resistance. So then you play it down, up and down like that until otherwise. So yeah, I kind of just call that daily range support or whatever, but it's also, yeah, I think it is like a dip, and then it goes up. And then also it's kind of cool how then later on that day, it looks like it actually compresses up against here. This would be my play, which is kind of funny. It makes a really nice compression here up against this range. So it just shows you how we have different, there's just so many different ways to trade these stocks. So again, both of these highs, 2 days inside days, a lot of energy built up. This general area is the top, and then sure enough, it's giving a pattern still with half the day to go. Surely something's about to happen. I bet RVol was high on this day, and then it breaks out with volume. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it looks like volume does start going up, and then you get a whole nother move here, and that would be my trade, which is the breakout of the range to find new value, which probably found new value right around there or something. So like I really like this, and so yeah, we can work on like the executions of that and how you want to enter what you want to see down there. Obviously you like those hammers with climactic volume or something, and that's perfect, because then if you're wrong, say you executed fine, but say it didn't do what you thought, it probably is then gonna break down and then maybe sell off and then create a new range down here, and I think that's how good this area is, this level is, this zone is. Like, if you're right for sure. It's gonna eventually make its way back up to here. If you're wrong, it's probably has a little bit extra RVol, and it's actually gonna break down and find a different value, or there's breaking news, or the market is so weak that it then, sometimes if the market's weak, say it didn't want to find new value, but market is so weak, sometimes it can just come down halfway maybe, and then it eventually comes back above, which then you could say, well, market pulled it down temporarily, comes back above, and then you could get long again above this with the idea it's going to go back up there. So I really like that. Okay, so here's one more dip and rip, your Tesla one. I like this one too. I'm assuming that you were seeing kind of it made value. Value was within here, right, with sort of an uptrend as well. So value was here, then in the morning price got really extended, but then it sold all the way back down, hit the top of this value, kind of rejected it, and you wanted to go long, and I like that. I am curious though, like, because I'm looking at the pivots here, and I know you like the pivots, and I guess I'm curious as to I'm curious that the pivots don't line up with, like, the pivots make sense, but they, like, the actual exact pivot level doesn't line up with this setup. So I'm just curious if this is maybe not your A+ setup, or maybe it's just one you found, but maybe you do want to find ones that only line, like maybe this has to line up with also S3, you know what I mean? Or like maybe this needed to go lower all the way to the bottom here, but then I guess it'd be coming back into value. But if that was S3, then you could go long there. So I guess, or maybe this needed to be R3, right? So it comes down, hits R3. So that's all. But other than that, I totally get this. Like, value here, comes up, comes all the way back down, then you get long right there. I think these are great. I think you're totally seeing all kinds of stuff. Now I'm kind of interested, after doing some of this work, if you can look at stocks from this week, maybe even some of your good stocks that you chose that you didn't trade well, and maybe you could find those again and save them and put them in here, but then put where you would have rather, or like, just, I don't know, maybe you can somehow make yourself feel better about some of the stocks this week and connect them with some of these, and maybe it was just like an execution needs to get better at, or maybe you'll see that some of the ones that you chose really just, they didn't line up with some of these, and that's why they just didn't work. But I do like a lot of these, so good job, and I like this playbook, and I look forward to like exchanging charts here.